Welcome to today's Wisdom Seed. I'm Emily, the community manager here at Wisdoms for MacDowell. We've had a super busy week as we've dropped the third free mint instalment on Zora, which is open to collect. And tomorrow we have our IRL NFT preview party, where we'll be displaying our never seen before wisdom vessels. So yeah, all super exciting. And today's Wisdom Seed is also super exciting. We're joined by designer, technologist, and author Mindy Seu. Mindy's expanded practice involves archival projects, techno-critical writing, performative lectures, design commissions, and close collaborations. Mindy is the author of the Cyberfeminism Index, a beautiful book which gathers 3 decades of online activism and net art. And today, Mindy's joined by Izzy from Keiken, which I'm also super excited about. So yeah, thank you and welcome to you both. Before we kick it off, I'd love to ask you a question before I pass it over to both of you. So 1,000 years from now, in Necknell, when we don't have jobs, what would you be doing on a Thursday?
Thank you so much. It's great to be here. I am excited about this invitation, and great to be in conversation with you as well, Izzy. Do you want to take it away first?
Oh, I don't mind. Yeah. I'm really happy to be having this wisdom seed with you. I can have a go at thinking about what I would be doing in 1,000 years time on a Thursday. So I really hope that in 1,000 years time, I would love to just almost not. I'd love to kind of exist, kind of not even in kind of not a bit beyond my body, in the sense of I would just be energy and I'd be just floating around, more like in a sort of electromagnetic field type vibe of things, and just be floating around. But yeah, that would be very cool if I could experience that. So hopefully. What about you?
We had a similar reaction to this question. I didn't explicitly state electromagnetic fields, but I was trying to focus on sensations and feelings that we'd hopefully have at that time. And I do think now, with this emphasis on productivity and efficiency and seamlessness, hopefully in the future, it'll actually feel much slower and we can focus on emotions that aren't necessarily related to this kind of productivity. So whether we're both blobs floating around, I do feel our hope that we'd be kind of nestled in these emotions of joy and care.
Yeah, that's super nice. I hope so as well, because sometimes we have to just move so fast, going through so many things in our society, and also I think as well a lot of the tech that kind of exists currently. I mean, the more popular one, it's kind of a lot about efficiency or decision making, and actually I just really hope, and this is what I'm personally interested in, it's just being able to exist in a way that is more cosmic, is more sensorial, is more sensational. I mean, we can kind of do that a bit anyway, but I hope so as well, that things have we're able to live in a slower paced reality. Definitely.
Absolutely.
So I'm not sure, either we can just keep talking more about kind of the future, or I don't know if you want to I don't know if you want to introduce anything else further, or we can just delve straight into what we could predict, what we could imagine in the future.
Let's dive right into it. I think it's kind of nice to move kind of into the speculative space and away from what we're currently working on.
Okay, amazing. Okay. Okay, perfect. So let me think. Okay, so what I think for us, so a lot of the things that we've been world building in our practice, I mean, we're a collective, so I'm always working with different people, and we often have a quite dialectic approach of looking at things. And I think for us, we really resonated with this word protopia, which is kind of the idea of striving for something that's better but not perfect, because of the problems with I think dystopia can sometimes be a little bit too well, it's great to be very critical, but you know, I want to birth that into the future, but then utopia also can be also not also realistic as well. So what would your, I guess my question now is like, what would your ideal distant future world look like?
Yeah, I think I love this framing of protopia rather than utopia or dystopia. I think generally utopic spaces have never quite been possible, but I do think utopic or maybe protopic principles have been and can be applied to what we're doing now. Things like universal access to all knowledge, open borders, etc. So in the ideal distant future, I would hope that uh, we could have a collectively governed and mutable network of care. And I think this mutability is really important. When speaking with friends, we always refer to kind of like the structures of BDSM because it makes you question, in that analogy, what sex actually means, and also have you remove expectation of what the act actually is, and then you can actually get into the brainstorming of what's actually pleasurable for everyone. And that contract can change throughout the session. So if we were to plant that into an ideal distance space, this idea of laws and governance and protection, I do think is still worthwhile to have these structures, but allowing them to be collectively created and change over time, depending on consensus, feels like it could be really valuable.
Yeah, no, definitely. I kind of agree that of course, like you need structural things to like help with the, yeah, like I really like that reference with the safety, but then at the same time, things always move fluidly. So you need things that are constantly in progress and like having
Exactly.
space to change.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. Yeah. So it's like continuously like space to always grow, evolve, but like consistently in the process.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah, I think for us as well, we were also like imagining like this ideal like future as having this, would have this kind of care, like carer, but I think we kind of gave it as like one entity, but I think it would be probably a lot of made up of multiple, and it was a kind of this like divine feminine AI type entity that would govern also, which would help with the resources and distributing the resources, but like
Mm-hmm.
wider big decisions. But then humans or like other species would get to like go in smaller groups and like kind of collectively organize themselves in like smaller ways and have the freedom and space to do so, so that you still give the independence. So I think that was something that we were thinking about for the distant
Mm-hmm.
future.
Well, and I think the interspecies aspect that you mentioned is extremely important, right? Like instead of having a hierarchy of who has access to materials and what are people or resources or places that we're thinking of as in terms of extraction, if we actually tried to level all of that out and understand that we're part of an ecosystem, then perhaps we wouldn't have this hierarchy and it wouldn't be more about extraction, but instead about redistribution or just distribution generally.
Yeah, no, definitely. And it's even, you know, I think, yeah, definitely like for us or for me personally, it's like, I think there's so much wisdom in other species, and I think we've put like there's been like a hierarchy like so put on like the human perspective, but there's so many other species that have different senses or different perspectives, and then even within ourselves we have all these cells that have all their own like intelligence and systems as well. So
Mm-hmm,
we
mm-hmm.
are deeply fluid on the inside out as well.
Yes.
Yeah. So yeah, it's like so I'm just going back to like the questions again. What if okay. I think because we've been going in quite like a dream, I think this is like going like further, but I guess I think visually like visually or like sensorially, what would you imagine, like if you could just keep traveling through so many different like speculative like worlds, or like in a collective way, what could that look like?
Wow. Well, I do think right now our culture is very focused on the visual. I think also with my background in graphic design, I would love to see like kind of this flattening effect. So again, moving away from this idea of hierarchy of one sense versus another. Um, I guess the sense doesn't really focus on what this place could look like, but again, if you could feel it, how can we actually increase certain senses to be more attuned with different senses and how that plays into the context or experience of a space? So places that are more abstracted, maybe focus primarily on taste or touch or etc. I think also because I tend to navigate in like institutional or academic settings, something like touch is absolutely not acceptable because we have these things that we're trying to protect and convey. But generally, if we're working in a space where we do have a lot of consent models, I think touch is something that's really beautiful outside of a romantic relationship. So I think how can we intensify a lot of these senses that we have rather than focus primarily on what things look like? Instead, we can focus on what they feel like.
Yeah, no, I think that's super nice, because I think, yeah, like a lot of the visions of the future, the feeling gets left out. And I think definitely like the embodiment of things is so important, like it's so like deeply important. And there's so much like knowledge and things we pick up just through touch. Like you have to have that feeling being put into the future, because it's not, otherwise it will feel super like disconnected. And like
Mm-hmm.
understanding your different senses. And I think also another thing that I'm quite interested in is like also how could we unlock like going beyond like the human unfelt as well. So like what other senses could we also like uncover or like
Mm-hmm.
uncover. And like I think, and even when you look at different other species, like there's so many different species that have like these amazing like other like senses or something like that. I can't remember exactly off the top of my head, but I can't remember. I feel like a catfish can taste from like really far away. So
Mm-hmm.
like
Sure, it feels like
crazy.
yeah, I
Yeah.
mean,
So I'd love to like be able to imagine, like I would love to like also think, how could I go beyond what I can already like touch as well in the future? Like what would happen if we like merged, like could imagine and also like simulate being having these other new senses as well.
absolutely. I think also thinking about like the Schumann resonance, which because we're part of this like electromagnetic field, we already are attuned to senses without touch. Like we can tell when people are close, we can sense when it's about to rain, etc. So I think tuning into these things more, I think would be really important in the future.
Yeah, no, definitely. Um, Also, as well, like I think we've been like imagining as well, like humans like merging with other different like species or consciousness. Like I think we're like quite influenced by there's a scientist called Michael Levin who does a lot of like research on morphogenesis, which is, it's like the biological process of what like the cells do to form an organ or form something. And I think we like love to like imagine this idea that, okay, maybe in the future we've merged with, because of morphogenesis, we can organically like re-engineer ourselves to be merged with other like consciousness to help, and
Mm-hmm.
that could kind of unlock potential to understand, to unravel more about what consciousness is, and also connect more with other like species. So if you could like merge your consciousness with another species, what would it be?
You know, I've always loved jellyfish. And first, they're like beautiful organisms, but I think I'm drawn to them because of certain traits that they have. Like they're only possible of moving forward with the current. Like if you think of jellyfish tanks, they need to have a fan inside of them to help the jellyfish continue to move. They're very, very shaped by their environments. Um, and they're also quite communal creatures. So for me, trying to be more empathetic or in tune with those beings, I think would be quite powerful.
Yeah, that's really beautiful, that one. Yeah, I've never thought about like what it could be like to be part of a jellyfish and just like yeah. I know that like also like octopuses, what's really cool about them is they have, probably jellyfish too, but like they have the decentralized like nervous system as well.
Mm-hmm.
So I've always imagined like, oh, what would it be like to have a decentralized nervous system rather than so like a centralized one? Like, how could that be? It's like the brain is also in the hand. Like, I know we have a lot of intelligence in it, but we have the centralized nervous system. So,
Mm-hmm.
what would it be like to turn into it? Like, how could that feel? I mean, it's so hard. I find it so hard to imagine because it's so easy for the thinking to like dominate. Although I definitely find I'm definitely like really interested in like connecting into my body and feeling it and feeling what that other intelligence is happening. But also sometimes, especially in our kind of, I guess, the more like capitalist racing world, sometimes it's like my brain is like trying to keep up and go go go, but then my body's like,
Mm-hmm.
oh no, you like, this is not good, you need to relax and flow around a bit more and like connect more with me, basically.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I think that it also decenters our emphasis on like textual or written language, right? Like we're so used to logic in our primary conscious. So being attuned to like feeling present, we get all of these other senses and inputs that we're actually told to not really focus on. So I love this idea about whether it's with other animals or with ourselves, trying to understand these different forms of communication.
Yeah, no, exactly. And like also I'm just like interested as well, like how it can be, because again we have to use so much like words and logic, especially what's being input into a lot of like technology. Like we've like made like we last year, like we some I think we're still going to keep developing, but we've made like prototypes of like this haptic wearable womb. And it's cast from someone who is like pregnant, and it's made out of silicone. And like I think silicone is very fleshy, so it it really makes you feel like it's connected to your body when you wear it. But then
Mm-hmm.
also we put haptics underneath which send like the vibrations, and because it's into like the stomach, like, or like the kind of like womb area, it really feels like it's going into your actual intelligence, your stomach or womb area, but also into the silicon itself, which feels like it becomes part of you. But we put different animal sounds in it. And what's really interesting is that when you put words and you put logic, like more like words or very rhythmical things into it, because it's just different sounds that are programmed in, it just doesn't feel good. It doesn't work,
Mm.
basically. You have to, as soon as I start putting like water, fire, like very elemental, or I like do kind of more animalistic sounds or like clicking or all these type of things, it's like it feels good, like it makes the technology work. And I think I find it really interesting. It's like how there's so many parts of the, like so much, I made me really think about like, oh, so much of a lot of tech is really geared so much towards like the neocortex part rather than other parts of our bodies that are much more like much more like feeling or like connecting more to the, like, I guess the non-logical parts. I mean, I still see it as like useful and logical in some ways, but and it was just so interesting that the technology just did not work with logic.
Mm-hmm. No, absolutely. I think that we're such a like a logic and reason focused society, so really trying to understand like what these other intelligences are outside of a metric for what's successful or etc. I think is an important step to take, regardless if it's in the distant future or in the near future. Like, I think we're kind of starting to see this shift in learning spaces as well, right? Like, what are the different forms of communication or creativity or intelligence that's mapped through these other spaces rather than just through these pre-existing grading rubrics. But this haptic womb sounds beautiful. I'd love to try that.
Yeah, you have to. Yeah, I hope you can try it, especially because it seems like, yeah, you really identify or resonate a lot with like touch and feeling. It's very feeling orientated and very like touch heavy, and also because it's heavy and you lie down, so it really, you really feel it. But then, yeah, it's just something about the silicone. I mean, I love silicone. I love touching things, to be honest, a lot. So like, yeah, it's so funny. It's like whenever I'm like, I don't know, whenever I'm just doing anything or on the phone or something, I'm just always usually touching something or like,
Yeah.
but yeah, no, silicone is just amazing because it's so like it's so skin like. We actually like did ages ago like this performance where we had like it was durational, but this was before we ever made this haptic womb, and we just bought pregnant bellies, like silicone pregnant bellies, and like we had just we just had like our friends, or like we had like other people, kind of friends of friends, come and do this durational performance, and kind of and we had like different like gender expressions, like different ages, all where like all performing in it, and there was nothing else there was no other technology there, just the silicone wounds, and people got so attached to it, like people really started to care and have a very visceral response. So it's also interesting the kind of like how these kind of other interfaces can evoke like such a connection to it as well. So whatever like is being kind of created, there's a lot of like potential, but we have to like be careful, because we'll get like the whatever tech is kind of or interface is created, we can get like connected to it, and actually there's so much room to create like beautiful connection from if that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. I think that maybe also maybe a bit of a tangent, but I was recently at a conference where on the tables they had different things that you could kind of touch and play with as a way to remove the pressure from having to talk to people nearby and that the social discomfort that comes with that. And they actually found that people could ease into these conversations much better if their direction was actually pointed at playing with Play-Doh or working with this other material. And it was almost a form of like parallel play where you're both doing something quite visceral and haptic with your hands and removing some of the pressure, but still allowing for communication and conversation with the stranger next to you.
Oh, that's really interesting. That makes like a lot of sense. And it's also, I think that's the thing. It's like, I think definitely like the environment or like the space, it just can like really change how something goes sometimes, because it's not just me and another person. It's like also the energy of like the room, and like also how everyone's electromagnetic fields are like kind of, and like bodies interacting with each other, and like what else is there, and like sometimes having the touch, or just even having like nice smells, or all these like other kind of sensory things can super like make it super much more like inviting, or even like accessible as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, it also reminds me the disability activist and author Sarah Hendren. She was teaching this class at Olin where her focus is primarily on people with disabilities, and she would have engineers work with someone and they would try to develop a tool that might be beneficial for them. And she actually found that when you're meeting someone for the first time and asking them, quote unquote, what their problems are, what they need help with, it's a very vulnerable and like hierarchical position. So they actually found that instead of introducing these like verbal prompts, they could actually have tools in front of them that they could play with and interact with, that then led to disclosures about certain forms of comfort or aid that they might need. So I think this is kind of similar to the Play-Doh thing, or how do you actually allow or create spaces where you can have comfort and allow for these kinds of conversations to occur naturally.
Oh, that's really interesting. No, like that, like definitely makes a lot of sense, and I think, yeah, like I know that haptic technology has definitely got a lot of it's got a lot of potential in terms of, I mean, obviously you can use more, like there's also more like other things, like even just Play-Doh, it seems like it's something that's really fun, nice to like touch and kind of,
Absolutely.
yeah, no, I would also be like the same, like anything like that. Like clay is also super nice. Also just like like kind of nature things, like I love like touching the grass or something like this. Can be super nice. But I know that there was things like in, so at a music concert, to make it like more accessible, I think they put like haptics and like balloons or something like that, and that could help hard of hearing to be able to
Oh.
feel the concert basically. And I think
Mm-hmm.
so many, like, and it's actually quite simple, like, you know, haptics is very simple. I mean, we have it, it's actually quite a lot in different places, like it's in our phones, everything, but it's actually quite like a simple thing. You can just like have a little speaker, and the vibration, like the frequency will make it vibrate. But I just think,
Mm-hmm.
like, yeah, super like lovely that actually, to make it more inclusive, you could have, and even just like you could have the haptic balloons, so that you could experience the sound of the concert.
Yeah, it feels like a fairly simple form of language translation. And I think more and more of this I've been seeing in other spaces, and just feels like a nicer way to, again, decenter our focus on the textual, the visual, the written, etc.
I'm gonna ask you, what, like, if you were to kind of like plant some wisdom into this like future world in 1,000 years, I mean, I'm sure you have a lot. What would you plant there?
So I think that one thing that has stuck with me, my former advisor in grad school was saying how she's from the Middle East. And she was saying how when she moved out to the US to teach with, she has a son that's now a teenager. And the teenager said, like, now he considers himself American. And not that she has like continental ties, but she realized that this in some ways made her kind of sad, because at least in the US, and I'm sure in many other industrial countries, they have again this focus on efficiency and productivity and setting these or achieving these pre-existing milestones as markers of success. But she actually found that you kind of need to have space to like wonder and wander and kind of dig around in order to really understand what you're drawn to and why. Otherwise, by the time you're in your 30s, you will have achieved every single marker of success that was told has importance to you, but it doesn't actually amount to something that you might actually find truly meaningful. So I do think that uh this space to wander and play and figure out what you're drawn to is actually an extremely meaningful time, even if it doesn't clearly map to these other metrics that we created. It reminds me of like the Rebecca Solnit book, A Field Guide to Getting Lost, right? Like, how do we create these spaces and time frames where we can wander a bit more?
No, definitely. And it's almost like you have to let go of you have to let go of the like the metric of, oh, this equals this. Oh, if you successful, or you achieve this, it will bring this, rather than just like having space to, as you were saying, wonder, having space to just let go and just like it, I guess, like give yourself over to the wonder, like be, because, and that also can be very, it's also very like it's a very creative place to be in when you're also just wandering and like flowing around and kind of coming across different things as well. I mean, I love nothing more than, I wish I could do this much more, but just like being really just like wandering out in nature and just getting like lost, but being kind of fine with it and just kind of going with the flow. But it's rare, but I would love to do more of that. So I'm hoping in the future where we can just, again, as we've kind of been calling them like cosmic goals, we can just like follow these different threads and wander around.
Yeah, absolutely. It's this trust and intuition, and not necessarily needing a concrete map.
Exactly. We also like thought about, we kind of had this defined sense of space and time that we imagined, which was that you get to move between the different states. So rather than it's just, you have a childhood and then your teenage, like, you go through these like different steps. I can't remember, we have, what are they all called? But one of them is, so you have like the watering years. I think you have like the reflection years. You have the building years. So like the building years is when you're like going out and you're like kind of making stuff happen. But then maybe you're like, oh, you know what? I need to go back to the watering years. I need to just be kind of watered. I need to not do anything. I just need to absorb that. Or maybe I just want to go back even further, but just be held for a while, and then I'm ready to build. And you get, so it becomes like your sense of space and time is not linear. It's more cyclical, and it allows space for like the different times that you need different things, but there's flexibility to which time, because it kind of happens anyway, but we go through different like stages, but sometimes you just want to go back or forwards. So I think, yeah, we just like the idea of having like more fluidity with space and time.
Absolutely. Yeah, I agree with this. I think that I feel like this is also very intensified because of our culture's fixation on youth and like markers of achievement in a certain young time frame, like all of these 30 under 30 lists. I had a friend's studio several years ago, Carly Aries. They created this other list called 100 under 100. So it was a nice way to kind of expand out, like, okay, who are interesting people doing interesting things, but essentially divorced from these markers of youth. So I think it's also this shift in how we can qualify like what's important and why. And again, by not focusing on youth, that means you're not focusing on efficient productivity now, but it can actually be expanded into an extended time frame that doesn't have necessarily like clear markers.
Yeah, no, definitely. And also, and there's not this like, I guess, urgency or like being like, oh, it's, there's not this thing of, oh, it's running out, or I haven't done like the feelings, like the kind of projected feelings of regret or something like that, when actually you just, it's fine. Like, things have different like growing like things. If you look, if even just like seasonally, if you look at trees or like plants, they're not always bloom. Like, I mean, I know some bloom a bit more, but they're not blooming all year round. They go through different states continuously.
Right. Right. That's a great analogy. It's like we're currently asking everyone to be like some sort of perennial, when in fact, many of us have these seasons that we have to go through.
Exactly. And like there is the wisdom of sometimes like you need to like go into like, less blooming, but there is like the wisdom of like slowing down or like reflecting, or you need to be more like, less I don't know, more reflective, maybe like less like visual brewing, like loads of energy. I mean, even I can't remember who the reference was, but I know that basically when humans, like when it was like the summertime, especially if you think about like seasonal, it's a time to be walking outside, really going over like long distance of time, whereas I guess winter it's much more you know like not, you don't need to move as much, you do shorter like bursts, whereas I think in summer it's just like that. And I think what I really liked about that was just how you, again, a bit like the plants, it's like we also need to go through like different states as well, and that is a good thing as well, rather than it being like, oh, we need to be the full bloom all the time, or we need to have energy, or it needs to be summer all the time. I mean, that would be very nice, but but also it's not, it's not like that. And I think how you need to have space to go through those different cycles, and the world is more cyclical than I think the society has been, like our current society has been set up.
Yeah, it's like even when people tend to find inspiration, it's not done by staring at a screen necessarily. I feel like most people I know, their ideas come to them because they're constantly experiencing new things, absorbing them, and then coming up with different ideas like in the shower or on a walk or doing these other activities that give some space to let this thing simmer. So I think it's also about trying to also consider that a necessary step in whatever other things we're trying to work on.
No, exactly. And often just like when you move your body, over a long time, if you're, I don't know, even if you're, say you're feeling frustrated about something, if you just go on a long walk over a long period of time, your body will calm you down and you'll have like a clearer like perspective. But also I found some of my like like that creative moments have been when not necessarily like staring at the computer screen. It's when I've been moving, also interacting with people. Like I respond a lot from other people, so that's why I wouldn't want to be an artist on my own, because I really I like to respond of other people, and I like the alchemy of minds coming together and what that also does and what that kind of creates. So having space for that alchemy is really important. I think.
I feel very similarly to this. Like I generally don't like working alone. I really like to be in communion with other people, whether their ideas complement mine or not. Like they can actually be very critical of something that I'm doing or vice versa, but this is still the kind of synergy or alchemy that allows for these new things to occur. I guess also kind of related, my partner and I have this phrase where if we're in an argument or you can't bring up something important to discuss, using the acronym HALT, which is when you're hungry, angry, lonely, or tired. Because this just tends to exacerbate the issue rather than when you're in a state of peace or calm, it actually feels like a more productive or like healing conversation. I think hungry can also be exchanged for horny, but essentially, like when you're at these peaks of emotions, these big decisions shouldn't be made at that time.
No, definitely. I mean, I'm definitely guilty of every time I'm maybe a little bit like, every time I'm more annoying to my partner, it's when I'm hungry. Like literally every single
Oh,
time.
absolutely.
It's like I'm
Yes.
always the most unreasonable, and then all the other times mostly I'm definitely much more reasonable, but it's just like like I need to be fed in the morning or it's just not going to go well. Like,
Absolutely. There's hangry and there's also tangry. So hangry is angry when you're hungry, but we coined tangry, which is angry when you're tired, because I also get kind of
oh, I love that.
irritable when I'm tired. So I think if we avoid both of these, or at
Yeah.
least nurture those instincts first, then we don't have to go into the angry territory.
Exactly. Yeah, no, also it's so interesting when you're tired. It's like it's like if you're aware of it, that your tiredness, it makes the negative, like I feel like I look at things much more negative, like so much more negatively. And I also become, it's like there's some moments where I'm not noticing things, but then there's some also weird moments of like perfectionism when I'm tired as well. And like, because you're seeing it, you've got like your negative, it's like your vision is negative, how you're seeing the world. Like it's like, it can be so simple. It can be sometimes such simple needs that can like help put on a different lens, a different frame of vision. But yeah, that's so funny, the like that.
Yeah, take care of your body first and then
Exactly.
focus on the other things.
Exactly. Exactly. So I think that's the thing. If you can, if we can have like, if everyone can have the resources to be able to like look after themselves, or in the future it is more like people are more collectively cared for, so that basic need, like more basic needs are covered, rather than this like stark like inequality, then it will enable people to be able to go in, like it will enable like more, like it'll enable much more space, and like more space to like flow, or like we can follow more cosmic goals maybe, and be less like in our like less having to be in our like efficiency and just doing this and like A to B type stuff. I hope.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, even machines need care and maintenance. I don't think anything is built to be efficient all the time.
No, definitely. Yeah, and I remember, so like Helen, like a researcher called like Helen Hasso, who's done a lot on like post-art
Xenofeminism.
yeah, exactly. And I remember just like, I remember listening to like talk of hers during the beginning of the pandemic, and she was speaking a lot about how one of the biggest, like the biggest part of the economy is care work, but it's financially, is the least like financially compensated as well. And actually, like the systems of care are just so like important, because it is going to be so important. Obviously it's so important now, but it's also going to be so important in the future, because as you say, everything kind of needs care. Like
yes,
it can definitely be very temperamental sometimes, so you have to like I've been working a lot just like the last month with 3D printers, and they can sometimes play up, so you just have to talk to them nicely and be like, are you okay?
yeah. Well, and when you read these studies by OpenAI or etc., care work is one of the few spaces that cannot be automated. Like, it really requires this human hand. So I think it also kind of points to this question of like feminist economies, or why we don't value domestic labor or care work in the same way. And even if these are things that are keeping society running, because they're not these clear markers of quantitative metrics, then they're considered less valuable, even if that's the thing, this oath of maintenance that allows things to progress.
Yeah, exactly. And I think the dominant, especially like in like in those like industrial like Western countries, can be it's like with capitalism, it's like money is the most like important like value system, but we don't value care work in the same way. But actually it's such a huge part of like the need of things. It takes up so much time. It's like crazy. It's like I think we like to think about like, motherhood is like you're birthing consciousness. Like that's pretty crazy. Like crazy that we create consciousness, and raising consciousness is such an important thing. Yet in like, especially I'm from the UK, like it's not valued. It's not like valued in the same way as finance or other like other systems in place. But yet it's so important. It's like maybe one of the most important value systems in some ways, but it's just not valued or like cared for in the same way. So that there'll be more forms of value in the future, or hopefully in the present too.
Yes. Well, I think also when people hear like feminist economics, this does not mean like labor done by women or like feminized labor. It means rethinking the study of economics to consider a holistic lens.
Mm-hmm.
So, what are the different parts of an environment or a system that allows certain things to happen? And that requires maintenance and care, and these kinds of invisible labor that aren't as sexy or
Mm-hmm.
quotable as the things later in the line. So I
Mm-hmm.
think I really like considering it from this very holistic or ecosystemic angle.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, definitely. And like that's the thing, there's so many like things that get missed, like that get missed out, and it should, and like those things that are like sexy labor should be considered, they should definitely be considered valuable and be made to exist, rather than rather than I guess the whatever is the like blooming thing, or like seen as the most like kind of on the surface level, as the surface level value being seen as valuable, or like earning lots of money, or like earning crazy amounts of money or something like that as the most valuable thing.
Yeah, precisely.
I wanted to like ask you another thing, which was if have you like tell us like one piece of wisdom, and it can be like good or bad, that someone's given you that you'll just always remember.
Yeah, I think that so the best part about being a professor or a
Mm-hmm.
teacher is to be surrounded by brilliant students. And during my last class on Monday with some of the grad students, Korean Antigone and Jules introduced this idea about the lineage of gossip. So gossip now is seen with a negative connotation. But when it was first emerging, it was actually considered like a feminist caretaking device because it allowed people to commune and kind of allow people to be vulnerable, have different strategies of protection, or trade different things that people might need to do well in their current environment. And gossip actually emerged from godsip. At the time, it was almost used as a marker for someone who was pious in religion. For example, gospel has the same root as gossip. But then over time, people suspect, like Silvia Federici, who's written about this, that it's kind of mutated into this negative connotation of people talking behind people's backs and etc. Mainly because we were constantly antagonizing these feminist circles of discourse. So I really like this idea that being able to talk vulnerably with other people, talk about others, talk about ourselves, isn't inherently bad. It's actually a really important strategy. It's just the maliciousness that currently is overlaid on top of it. That's the thing that needs to be interrogated. And that doesn't necessarily come from gossip itself. So this is something I've been kind of mulling over quite a bit. It's been a nice, thought experiment.
That's really interesting. I've never heard of that before. No, that's I'm just thinking about it because, of course, gossip is always seen in a in a bad as a bad thing, but it's interesting always when you look into the roots of things and how it's been like transmuted across from where it became. I mean, I guess it's very, when I guess if you're not if you're not spreading like malicious things, it's something that helps to form community. So that's something that can easily become lacking, but it's something that as we need to have exchanges with each other. We need to feel like connected and be able to also have freedom of like exchange as well with in a safe way. So
Well, and if you consider like some of the roles of gossip now, in some ways they're like strategies of defense, right? Like how to offer, be careful with X because this thing has happened, or even being able to speak openly about what's happening in your life with others. I think it's the virality that makes it a bit malicious now, just because it transmutes so much in transfer. And I think also it's been very sensationalized. So it's also become an industry where we want to say bad things about other people. But as a revisionist history, it's nice to think about its origins.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, I'll have to I have a more of a think about it. It's interesting. Yeah, I was also just wondering as well, like if anyone in the audience wanted to like ask us any like questions as well before we like reached kind of the end.
Yeah, feel free to request to speak and join us. Also, we've been dropping all the references and resources that have been mentioned in Discord as well. There's always so much from these wisdom seeds of different books and studies, so we like to keep a record of them.
Yeah, you can always, well, if anyone wants to message me anything, welcome to do so. I think, I think it's been like really nice speaking to you. We've gone through like so many different strands as well, which is like super nice. And I think, it's like, I think what's nice about these kind of like this conversation is that I think the act of it is that we are trying to plant like wisdom seeds, and so that there is space to grow for it. I think there's been a really nice like tangent about like going back to like touch and like floating around and feeling as well, which I also really resonate with as well. So I think that's been like super lovely, like to speak with you, Mindy, and and have this conversation.
Yeah, thank you so much, Izzy. So one question we didn't get to, if there's no audience questions, was to name one book or text that you'd like to enter into the library of NECNEL. And I wonder if this would be a good place to close, because I have a poem and maybe I can read it.
Oh, yes, please. I'm so sorry. I like missed that question.
Oh, no,
and it's
not at all.
so important to ask you this one. Like, it's very relatable, this one. So
it's my favorite poem.
please.
It's so beautiful. I'm sure many people have heard this, but it just feels so apt for the time we're living in. It's the Richard Brautigan poem, All Watched Over by Machines of Loving Grace. And it's 3 stanzas, fairly short. He writes, I like to think, and the sooner the better, of a cybernetic meadow where mammals and computers live together in mutually programming harmony, like pure water touching clear sky. I like to think, right now please, of a cybernetic forest filled with pines and electronics where deer stroll peacefully past computers as if they were flowers with spinning blossoms. I like to think, it has to be, of a cybernetic ecology where we are free of our labors and joined back to nature, returned to our mammal brothers and sisters, and all watched over by machines of loving grace.
Oh, that's amazing. Thank you so much for reading that.
Yeah, it's a really beautiful one. I think it's something that's very much in line with everything we've discussed now, with the future or the near future. It's really just feeling like we're in communion with an ecosystem again.
No, definitely. And no, I love like, I also like, again, like what we're talking about is just like being able to be inclusive of like thinking about the whole ecosystem, thinking about how we like merge. We don't just consider like ourselves or like humans. It's kind of like going beyond it. How do we have a more like encompassing and like encompassing like system as well? Like that's kind of in line with like the system of nature as well, which is super beautiful.
Yes, definitely.
So yeah, thank you so much, both of you. It's been really wonderful hearing this conversation, because I feel both of your practices are quite different, but you have this like interconnectedness with future visions and like possible futures. So it's been really, really wonderful. And we also have a channel going in Discord where people submit books to the Library of Necknell, and your Cyberfeminism Index is in there, Mindy. So
Oh, thank you. Wow, that's great.
so yeah, thank you so much for your time, and yeah, till the next wisdom seed.
Thank
Till
you
the
so
next one.
much.
Thanks again.